Well, all right. Welcome, all of you. So glad that you could join us for this online class for InDesign, talking about flyers today. My name is Caitlin Tips, and I work at the Harrington Library, and I am a library instructor and research specialist. Today, we have helping me out, we have Hannah and Anna, who are also library instructors. You guys want to say hi?
Hello, my name's Hannah.
Hello, I'm Anna.
And they're helping us out with our chat today. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to post it in the chat, and they will either relay your question to me, or they will answer it in the chat. So it's exciting stuff. I'm really grateful for their help. So let's jump into the program. So as you can see, we started off with this poll to kind of gauge everyone's experience with Adobe InDesign. Which again, it's a great software, it's a great tool, and I do understand that it can be a little daunting if you don't have a lot of experience with this software, or if you do. So if you do have this software at home, great. If you've downloaded the free 7-day trial, that's great as well. If you don't have it, that's fine. You can still follow along. Today's class is very general. It's going to give you a lot of the basics as well as tools for how to proceed in the future. So if you don't have access to this on your home computer, you can make a computer appointment at 2 of our library locations at Haggard or Davis Library to make a 2-hour computer appointment for their Adobe computers. Also, I would highly recommend checking out our lynda.com classes. Those are great resources to where you can learn more about InDesign or any other questions that you guys might have. So I'm looking forward to jump in. And with that, I think we will. All right. So what is InDesign? It is the industry standard publishing application for print and digital media. It's great for page layout and web design, and it's useful for creating things like flyers, books, magazines, newspapers, interactive PDFs, and more. It really is the pinnacle for layout software. However, there are other softwares out there that are free that you can do much of the same things. So if you have any kind of experience working with Canva or Publisher, those are some alternatives that you can use if you don't have Adobe InDesign. But much of what we will discuss today has some overlap aside from the tools. But the principles of the design, those can be transferred between software. So flyers. When you think of a flyer, what do you think of? Do you think of something being handed off in the street, attached to your car? Or is it, do you think of more of something that's like a poster? It's very important to know what kind of flyer that you want to design, because that can impact how you design it, what message you try and convey. And also, if you didn't know that there were multiple kinds of flyers and you go to just print something off, they may ask you, what size? What are you looking for? Because a lot of everything with InDesign, it's going to depend on what kind of output that you want. So there are 3 main types of flyers. There are brochures, leaflets, and digital flyers. A brochure is a document that is typically formatted to fold. So this could be something like a bifold, a trifold, Z-fold. Z-fold is going to be something like an accordion fold. And then you have the more common C-fold. So if anything that I'm saying sounds a little like jargon-esque, these are printing terms. So printers will not refer to the fold as an accordion fold. They'll typically say, oh, are you looking for C, Z, N, etc. And for brochures, they're a little bit more challenging for the design process because you have to think about page and positioning. But they are also really great in terms of how you convey information. So if you're wanting to convey more information, but still have something that's easily accessible in terms of handing it out or sticking it in a mailbox, using it for a restaurant menu, anything like that. Brochures are a great option. And leaflets can be something formatted to a single or double-sided page. They can be something that you fold once, but then they're essentially a brochure by that point. Leaflets are typically something that you print on a less quality paper because it's not meant to last long. You're trying to attract interest. So for instance, the Need a Math Tutor sign, it has tear-offs. Something that you created as a leaflet for that portion, it's something that the viewer can still grab and go and take with them. So those are aspects that you want to think about when you're designing a flyer. It's important when you're trying to decide what type you're going to use. Digital flyers are perhaps the easiest to design for because you don't have to worry about offset printing. You don't have to worry about any kind of edges or anything, because everything that you're designing on the screen, that's how your user will view it. So it's something you can send out in an email blast. You can link to it on a website. You can use it on social media. So it has the added benefit that it's free. You don't have to worry about printing costs that way. So do you guys have any opinion on what kind of flyer we create for this class today? Give you guys a moment to answer that. Okay, it looks like there's the greatest interest in digital flyers. I will show examples of all three. And if you guys have any specific questions about the others, please feel free to still post it in the chat. And they'll either relay that to me or I'll answer it at the end. Okay. So something that I like to go over before we just jump into the software is thinking about the design. And there's the 3 F's: form, feeling, and function. So the form, that's going to be the meat of our design. That's what font we're using. That's what colors, graphics, etc. That's the form of it. However, you can't do those without knowing what your feeling and function are. So first and foremost, I always ask people, what purpose, what are you trying to convey? What is this going to fulfill for you? Are you trying to send out an invite or let people know that you're having an event? What message is it that you're trying to convey? And then with that function, are you actually matching that with your design? So feeling is what you ask yourself after you've thrown some things onto the page, and then you look at it and you think, is this matching up? Because oftentimes you'll think, oh, I'm going to use red and yellow or green and blue, but those colors, when they're viewed differently, depending on the shade and everything, they can add to a different kind of message than you intend. It can be excitement, or it may be more passive than you think. So I'll show some examples and I kind of explain more what I mean by that, but just as a short kind of description there, if you're inviting people to a yoga studio, you don't necessarily want to have the colors red and yellow there. That conveys a different message than using something like purple or blue, which is more calming and relaxing. So again, we'll get into that as I jump into the software and show you different designs that you can do. Do we have any questions so far?
We're working on one in chat, but we will answer that if we find the answer for it. But nothing else so far.
Okey-doke, no worries. Feel free to keep those questions coming. All right. So before we jump into the software, I just like to go over a couple of the key tools beforehand, so you guys can already identify those. So the direct selection tool is going to be a black arrow in the software, and you can use a keyboard shortcut for that V to go ahead and select it once you're in there. And then the text tool and the frame tool. Text tool looks like a T. Frame tool is a box with an X through it. And all of these kind of play into each other. The text and frame tool are also known as containers. And sorry, less minutes. They are used to contain the text and graphics or act as placeholders for your design elements. I like to start with those because those are going to be the three tools that you use the most often while we're going through this process. So with that in mind, let's jump in. Okay. All right, so we see the InDesign software. We're going to start with a create new, and I'll open some afterwards and show you some different things.
And Caitlin, I hate to interrupt you, but could you please explain the frame tool again?
Yeah. So the frame tool, specifically the one with the square and the X through it, that is something that creates rectangles of any kind of size. It's also something that if you click and hold on it, you can change the shape. But it's also known as a container once you have it on the page because it's really great for just doing placeholder text images. If you're not sure where you want something on the page, you can move it around later or delete it and create another one. And then when you go to add your text or your graphics, you can file place into that container, which I'll explain a little bit later once we get into the document, how that works and why it's an easier way to set up your workflow. Does that kind of help out?
I think so, yes. Thank you.
Cool, no problem. All right, so setting up your page in InDesign. So we have InDesign open and we are creating a new document. So as you can see at the top, it's going to have recent sizes that you worked in. It has saved templates that you've worked in. And then over here you have print, web, and mobile. So you guys asked that I work on a digital flyer for y'all. So that's actually really great because I can just work in a standard letter size. So I'm going to go ahead and click print because if I do web, that's going to make me actually work in sizes meant for a web screen. So like a web page, even though it says letter A4 typical document sizes, you can go ahead and work and print and adjust your workspace after the fact. And I also just find it easier. So we're going to go ahead and over here, change our units to inches because I don't feel like working in millimeters today, nor do I feel like working in points. If you're being more precise, it's not a bad idea to change what units you work in, but definitely set it up to work in a space that you're comfortable with. So underneath that, you have your orientation, and underneath that, you have facing pages. Now, facing pages is an option where you have your pages shown next to each other in your layout rather than in a single line. This is really only useful when you have more than 2 or 3 pages. So when you're working in something like a book or creating a newsletter or any kind of longer document, that's where I would say you would want facing pages. We're doing something very simple and short, so we're going to make sure that's not selected. And then if we were creating a column, this is where you could go ahead and say, I want 3. And we'll go ahead and select preview just so you can see kind of what's going on there. This is another great feature of InDesign is if you're ever not sure how something would look like, you can preview it before you say, yes, I'm creating this document. So as you can see, that's what 3 columns would look like if we were doing something like a brochure. I'll show you an example later a little bit more to kind of go over how setup for that would look like. But we're just going to have one column, and we want to go ahead and adjust our margins because 1/2 inch is pretty wide. We're going to drop that down to about 1/4 inch. And then if you go below that, you have bleed and slug. So bleed is a printing term that ensures that there are no unprinted white edges. So if you were looking to print this flyer at a later date, you could actually still set up bleed for this and say, I don't need a white edge, I don't need anything like that. However, an important thing to note is if you are printing at home, you will always have a white edge, even if you have a bleed set, because the bleed is actually communicating to your printer that you don't want your images and elements that touch the edge of the paper. You want that to extend beyond the trim edge and leave no white margin. So a professional printing house, what they do is they actually print that bleed, that entire document on a larger size paper, and then they cut it down to size. So that's what bleed is. It's why it's important for professional printers. Unfortunately, just for home printing, our home printers are typically not set up to do that unless you have something like a legal size and then you cut down to size your own document. Again, that's a personal preference, and there's a lot of options out there for professionally printing. But it's important to know what you want at the start when you're trying to design your document, so you can think about these things rather than try and add them in later. Because it can throw off your overall design. It can make your final output not quite what you want. Because again, it's not gonna, there's form and function, right? Form and function, is it matching what you need? So we're trying to get as much functionality as we can at the start. So we're doing something digitally, which is nice. It means that we can have a bleed or have images all the way to the edge and not worry about printing. Another fun thing to note, if you noticed earlier, whenever I adjusted the margins, this little icon here is linked, so everything adjusted all at once. Now, if I unclick that, it's a broken link. And if I adjust the top, it's only doing that for the top. But if I click here, it does it for all 4 of them, making your life a lot easier. Now, slug, we're not going to use it today because it's really, again, it's for your printer. It is a term that contains the registration mark and other printing instructions. So if you ever have something specific with a design that you're wanting printed, creating an area for slug is something that you would include just so you could say, hey, I need this done for my print. And again, that also depends on what printer you use, if they accommodate that or if they go into such detail. A lot of the times, if you're printing in bulk, they'll have someone in-house to kind of check your document, but that's not always the case, and it's something that you definitely want to make sure you're researching when you get to the printing portion.
Hey, Caitlin. We had a question in chat. Someone said, so the 0 indicates no bleed, and then how do you select the color for that?
Okay. So yes, 0 indicates no bleed. So I'm going to move this over. See that red line there? That red line that extends past the page is the bleed that we have created. Now, if we decrease that, there's no bleed. It goes back to just the regular page size. So we increase that. And now in terms of color, you're right. Typically you can adjust if you're designing for CMYK or RGB. It doesn't look like we have that option right here. It might be that the print preset here just means that we're automatically going to work in CMYK. For those of you who are unfamiliar with that, CMYK printing is printing colors for your printer. RGB is typically used for just digital view. So any kind of device that you're working on or viewing will typically have an RGB color scheme rather than CMYK, which is cyan, magenta, and I'm blanking on the colors.
Yellow and black.
Thank you. Yes, you get in the role of like saying the colors and such, and then you're like, wait, where was I? Thank you, Anna. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, for what we're doing, when we get into the color panel, you can kind of get a little bit more specific. We're going to go ahead and name our new page as Digital Flyer 1. And I like this. We're going to go ahead and click Create. There we are. So there is a handout that has an overview of the workspace, of the tools in greater depth. But just to give a brief overview of what everything is and where everything is for those who may not have too much experience in InDesign, this is what your workspace typically looks like. Over here you have your tools. So there's that black arrow that I mentioned earlier. There's our type tool, and here is our rectangular frame tool. And there are also shortcuts, keyboard shortcuts that you can find either by holding your arrow over them, or you can find them in the handout that I provided. Now at the top, you have your menu. Now I'm old school. I'm trained by Microsoft Word to view everything along the top. So I have my workspace set to Essentials Classic. However, this is what's known as your switcher. If you click this, you will see that you have a number of options for how you set up your workspace. You can even customize your own workspace. Pardon me. So just to show you what some of this might look like, or what InDesign is preset to, because the new one has just essentials. So if you're new to working in it, this is what it may pop up for you guys, which is just your panel will look more like this with tabs along the top. That's just not how I'm comfortable working in InDesign. So I like to work in Essentials Classic and see how everything adjusts along the top depending on what tool I select or what panel I have open. Again, like I said, I'm trained by Microsoft Word. Word has everything along the top, so it's a much more natural workspace for me. But feel free to play around with that and find what works best for you. For what we're doing today, we don't necessarily need advanced, we don't need book, and we don't need to really get into any of the other presets. So, and then we have our panels over here. If you find that you're looking for something that you can't see there, you can go up to Window, and that's where you can customize your panels and which ones you have available. All right. Any questions about that?
Nothing yet. I'll keep you posted.
Sweet. We'll keep going. All right, so I said at the start that our rectangle frame tool, our type tool, black arrow, Those are our best friends. And you might find that I mentioned something, rinse and repeat, quite a bit, because we are literally going to be jumping back and forth between those three tools the most in order to just set up our document and kind of play around with it. So for our digital flyer, we're going to start with this frame tool, and I'm just going to go ahead and start throwing some boxes on there, kind of mock up how I want my page. So I like a rectangle up here. I could throw an image in that, and then maybe I want a circle. And if you drag and click when you're by holding the shift key while you drag, it'll actually give you a perfect circle. So without it, oh, that was actually not bad. We'll delete that and try again. So that's without holding the shift key. If you hold the shift key while you click and drag, it is perfectly symmetrical. Some fun hacks there for y'all. And then you can kind of click, move, drag. Now what I'm doing right here is I'm kind of playing around with where I want graphics. And now I'm sort of thinking about what kind of flyer do I want? What kind of flyer do I want to design, and what message do I want to convey overall? So with everything going on in our lives, it can be really hard to communicate what's upcoming or what we still have available. So I'm going to just kind of play with the idea that this is a little shop that is reopening and having opening hours. If there's any objections or you guys have other ideas, feel free to throw it at me. But that's sort of what I'm going to play around with today. So I'm going to switch back to the rectangle tool, and I'm just going to draw another one here at the bottom. And so I've got 3 images on there. I'm going to go over to layers now. And layers are a great way to organize your content. I highly recommend either doing this at the start or after you've kind of thrown some things onto your page. So I don't want to just leave it layer 1. I'm going to double click it, and that allows you to rename it. And I'm going to say that this is my graphics layer. And then I want another layer because that's not enough for what we got going. I'm going to call this my text layer. And the important thing to know is when you're working with layers, if you're wanting to add more graphics, you have to make sure you have that layer selected. Now, if you're wanting to add text, you want to select that. Otherwise, if I'm still on my graphics layer and I go to the T tool and I click, it still has a blue outline when in fact I wanted that to be on the text layer. But there's a quick and easy way to fix that. You can actually select that over here in the layer panel and drag up onto the text layer, and voila, it is moved. It now has a red outline. It's great. Another fun thing to note is if you go back and you're wanting to add more graphics, say you realize that you wanted to add a logo somewhere, well, first and foremost, make sure you're on the right graphics layer. You added it there and you're like, great, I'm going to click over here on my text layer, my text box. Oh, whoops, I added another box. This kind of gets into rinsing and repeating. So you can delete that, but whenever you're done with the tool, always go back to your black arrow. It's a good reminder. That way you're not just stuck in the tool wondering, Why do I keep on creating this? What's going on? It's also great in case you're on the T tool and you're like, I don't want my text box there. I want to move it, because unfortunately you can't. InDesign is very tool specific. So we'll delete that, click that and drag under. And you may see these helpful green lines pop up. But there's also the wonderful purple lines. They may be pink on your screen. These are actually guides for centering your content on the page. If I moved it up, you will see that there's intersecting pink lines. That's going to be the very center of my page.
Caitlin?
Now I don't want my text there.
Whenever you get a second, you can answer this question, but we had a patron ask, so you just click on the box that you created, but didn't want to make it go away?
So, okay. So yes, you can click on a box that you've created. Now, if you didn't want to make it go away, that's fine. What I was saying is, if you were in this tool, in the rectangle tool still, and you created a box and you were like, that's great, that's exactly where I want it. And then you were like, but I don't want it right there. And you click again, you created another box. So just want to make sure that you're not getting stuck in a tool. And in terms of making it go away or not, so let's say that I wanted to keep this box. It's not where I exactly want it, but I'm not sure of that yet. Over here in the layers panel, you can actually hide things without moving them. It's those eyes to the right of whatever layer you're selecting. So I click that, it's back on the page. And let's say that I am really fond of where this circle is. And I want to make sure I don't make it go away. I can actually lock that layer to where it is on the page. So you see a lock symbol shows up there. And you can also make it go away just by clicking it again. Does that kind of sort it out? Or did I misunderstand?
Keep you posted if they respond in chat, but continue on. I'll hop in later if they say anything.
Cool deal. Good question.
Yes. Yes.
Ever go?
Yes. Good job.
Thanks. All right. So I actually don't want that box right there. And I'm just going to move this one off to the side. I won't delete it because I may use it later. But let's kind of play around. So this is our text frame right here, and there's a couple different options for text that you can kind of use. You can go straight to the text tool, start typing, or if you're still in the black arrow tool and you have that selected, if you double click that box, it'll go straight to the text tool. Just some fun tricks there. Now, at the top, you can see all of the font choices that you have within the software. One of the really great features of the newest update of Adobe Creative Cloud is that they support OpenType fonts now. So that means pretty much anything that was on your computer originally, Adobe will support, but anything also specific to Adobe, they've either converted to OpenType or it's just supported within the software. However, what I really enjoy about OpenType is you can go online to font generators or any kind of specific design, font designer. And if you find something that you're just like in love with, you can download it, import it, and as long as it's OpenType, which means it has that O next to it over here, you can import it into the Adobe software and it will then appear in your font menu. But we're not going to be that fancy today. We're just going to find something that we like. So fonts, typically they have serif and sans serif. So serif, typically it's that Times New Roman, it's that little tail on letters. And so it's typically known as being a more formal font. And sans serif is going to be your Arial. It's going to be this Corbel right here because it doesn't have a tail on any of the letters. So it really, again, that plays into the message that you're trying to convey. Is it a more formal flyer that you're trying to put out? Is your storefront a more formal type of business? Is it, are you just going for readability? All of those things. So even if you're working in Microsoft Word or Publisher or anything like that, pay attention to what font you're using. There's more to it than you realize. It's more than just the message you're typing with it. It's conveying its own message just by the design. And you know, I kind of like this copperplate Gothic light, and I like the sample. So we're going to play with that, and we're going to say that this is a small craft store, and we're going to say that it is so crafty. Pardon my puns. And I also am very stuck on my own crafts that I have while I've been quarantining. So it is playing a role in my thought process. All right. So this is going to be something that we send out digitally. To kind of play around with that, find the center of the page again. And you may find that when you're adjusting things with your mouse that it's not getting precisely where you want it to be. The keyboard keys, the up, down, left, right, are really going to be your best friend when you're trying to be precise about placement on your page.
Hey, Caitlin. At some point in your instruction, will you be covering how to change the page background to just, a simple color?
Yes, absolutely. So we're actually gonna kind of jump into that right now. So you can add graphics, you can set a color, you can do all sorts of things. Now, if you're just trying to change the background color, you're not going to be able to do that without creating a frame. So if you're wanting just like a solid color as your background, you're going to want to use the frame tool, this guy right here, and you're going to want to draw it to whatever parameter on your page that you want. So we can go ahead and demonstrate that. I'm going to draw it to our bleed and there we go. Go back to my selection tool, and you can see right now that that's on the top of the layers. So that's another fun fact. In your layers menu, the order top down that you see, that's the arrangement of items. So because this is going to be the background color, we will actually drag this down to be the bottom layer. That way we don't have to mess with it later when we are filling in our other objects. So if you go to your swatches panel, color is actually more gradient specific. You can see that CMYK, which again, you can plug in. If you have a specific Pantone color that you're going for, you can plug in the percentages right there. Otherwise, you can get into the swatches and you can choose a preset one. So we're going to go with blue. So that's how you make a background a specific color very quickly. And if you don't want the X through it, because you don't have to do that, you can also use just a plain rectangle tool underneath it. I just like using the frame tool in case I'm going to place objects within it. So, and what I mean by that is, for instance, if we were to select this rectangle right here and go to File, Place, or Control D, we can choose an image already uploaded to our computer. So, I don't know that I have anything saved right there that I want. Actually, I do. It's just not saved where I thought it was. So we are going to File, Place again, except we are going to go to my downloads. And I have forgotten where I put all of my images. I am sorry, guys. Well, a fun way to fix that is actually by going online, and you can find free images very easily by using resources like Pixabay or Free Graphics Vector, FreePic. So just make sure that you select free licensing. That way you can find whatever image that you're kind of going for. So I said crafts, so we're going to type in crafts here. And we're going to find a fun image. Oh, we don't need some of those that are popping up. But I kind of like this one. This is cool. It's got a lot of fabric, some florals there, a lot of different craft options. So we're going to do a free download. Excellent. Whoops, gotta prove I'm not a robot. Okay. Evidently, I'm a very not good example of not a robot. So we're going to download that. Back there. In File, Place. And in my downloads now, we should see that photo. Okay, so again, that's what I mean by the frame tool being a container. So you could have done that with your text box as well. You could import any kind of file type from like Word, Microsoft Word. If you had text already typed up there, you can import it that way. However, this maybe isn't exactly how I want that. It's not fitting the frame as I want it. So a quick way to fix that is to right click on your mouse and go to fitting, and you can fill frame proportionally. That kind of gets us a nice close up. And then when I hold my mouse in the center of this graphic, a hand pops up and you can kind of drag and adjust to kind of suit your fancy. If you're like, I don't know about that, maybe higher up, maybe that gets more of the craft option that I like. It's a fun way to do it without messing up the workflow that you already created. So I like that. That's kind of nice. It's got the scissors, the glue, cutting board, flowers, hot glue gun, I think, right there. But it's also a little blurry, right? So if you right click again and go down to display performance, which is near the bottom of that tab, you'll see that right now it's set to use view setting. Now, if I click fast display, it goes away. It's gonna be like, what? Can't do that because it's trying to process it as a web GIF or something, which isn't always great when you're working for print. So we'll go back to display. Typical, that's going to give us what we already had. However, if we go back and we click on high quality display, oh, okay, those details right there, I can see that it's folds of fabric kind of interwoven. So if you had an image that imports really pixelated, right click, go to view settings. Most of the time, it's going to fix whatever issue you have with the view. All right, so I still have quite a few other frames on here. So the circle, just for the purpose of time, I'm gonna fill that with paper to kind of illustrate what you can do with this design element. And then I'm gonna go ahead and go down here to the text and double click it, and I'm gonna change that to paper as well. Now the reason why I select paper and not white is because in printing, there is no white ink. So paper is just saying, hey, you're not printing here, you're leaving that blank. So if you're going to use a different colored paper, say you have blue, green, whatever color printer paper, just know that if you're designing and you print on that, your paper background is going to be whatever color that is. So it's important to know if you're planning on printing a color background or if you're planning on just leaving it blank, you don't want to not be able to print the color that you need. All right. Does everything make sense so far? Okay, nothing's going on, so cool. So I like the fact that my circle can come up in front of this image here and it's on top of everything else, and that's due to the arrangement. So going back to that layers panel, it's not the very top of my images here, but I can make it the top. That way, even if I drag it down here, it's going to be the top layer. The only layer that is above it right now is going to be that text layer. And that's because anytime you have text, you want it to be on top, you want it to be ahead of graphics. So again, going from that top-down approach, you have text going to be above graphics. And that's just because text is the message that you're conveying. It's the information that's going to be most useful. Now, for the purpose of kind of showing you what this can look like, I'm going to go ahead and bring up an example of a digital flyer I've already created. So I'm going to go to File, Open, and there's my digital flyer example. So this is something that I've already made. It's for a yarn exchange online for like a neighborhood group, via Zoom even. So that's something that you could then go to File and Export, because InDesign is great, but unless you're printing or sending it to someone else who has a software, you want to make sure they can view it. So InDesign is great. It's going to say, what do you want to convert it to? You can save it as a PDF, which most computers have already installed on their computer to view images and such, or you can go simple, do a JPEG, do a PNG file, which if you're doing a JPEG or a PNG, it's great because you can embed that directly into your email. And I have that saved already there, but just to show you what that would look like, let's do a JPEG. We're going to save, and that's going to pop up another window in your InDesign view. And you want to make sure that your image export quality is set to either high or maximum, because anytime that you have both graphics and text, you want to ensure that you're keeping that quality when you export it. What happens when you go to a lower size file, it's going to be less size, but when you export it and you go to open it, it's not going to be as nice. Just to give you an example of that, because I believe it went here. Yep.
Would you be able to open up that file? For some reason, I can't see how you're navigating through your file folders. Is showing me InDesign. So
Ooh,
InDesign,
okay. Sorry, guys. I've been talking about my files that pop up, and I'm like, okay. Didn't realize you couldn't see it. Let's see. Do you see this? Yes? No? Maybe?
No, nothing
Am I
yet.
good?
Your
Nothing
screen
yet?
sharing options at the top of Zoom, maybe?
Maybe. Let's see. Okay. Yes. Now?
Yes, good job.
I did a thing. See, we're all learning, guys. Okay, so this is something that I exported. It still has fairly high resolution, but it could be better. See the top here, it's a little bit blurry. And anytime, if I were to embed this in something else, I couldn't ensure that this thinner text here would still be visible. So as a safe bet, it's always good to go with a high or maximum if possible when you're converting. So let's go back. Let's go back to InDesign. All right. And this would then be something that you could embed in your email option by either clicking, I believe it's either the paperclip or an image, and that would allow you to add it directly to an email. Just to kind of show you some more examples of flyers that are out there. All right, this is another one that I've kind of created. Again, you can definitely see I've had crafting on the brain. This one is so perfect. And it has that dark background that someone liked. InDesign has a really great feature over here on your tool panel in the lower left. You can adjust how you view your document. You can view it normal, which is going to show you all the frames. It's going to show you, oh, that's the size of that text frame. Or you can go over here and be like, I just want to see my bleed. And as you can see, I really didn't do much with the bleed, but that's what it would look like printing. If I sent this to a printer and I said, this has to go all the way to the edge, they would come back to me and be like, but your image is set to the margin. And they'd be like, there's no reason to stop it. But it's really great, again, if you have those documents that are set to it. Slug, we don't have any instructions for our printer, so we don't have to worry about that. And if you were presenting, you could have it set to full screen. But if you're curious about what your final design looks like or how it would view on screen, going to preview mode will give you a nice indication of how it should look. This flyer, I used a fun aspect of the type tool, which was type on a path. So anytime you go over to your tool panel, it has that little arrow in the corner and you click and hold, it's going to pull up more options. And there's so much that you can do with a lot of these. It's definitely something, if you have the time to just sit and play, just sit and play. You learn most easily by doing. In the type on a path tool, I did that by clicking on the circle and typing around the circle and going to my stroke and making sure that the line was set to invisible. And another fun thing, so the the square that has nothing set to it, that's your fill. The square that's just the outline, that's your stroke. So that's going to be the outline. So that's something that you can set just by clicking one or the other in your swatches panel, in your color panel, or over here. You can adjust that just by clicking that in your tools panel as well, or clicking the swap and fill. which is just the arrows. So there's a million different ways to do things in InDesign. The ways that I've shown you today, that's just scratching the surface. And I mentioned earlier that I would show you guys what a brochure setup would look like. I don't have this one completely filled out, mostly because I was more concerned about getting the imposition conveyed. So when you're designing a brochure, again, this is something you can do in any other software that you may have. It's also fun to note that when you open a new document, it's still going to use whatever tool you had open previously. So I'm going to switch back to my black arrow. You have, this is going to be, just to show you, because this has multiple pages, you have a front and back. But so page A, I'm page 1. I have my interior left, my interior middle, and my interior right. That's fairly straightforward because you have to think about this folding, and this is just a traditional brochure fold. So this folds in, and then you have the flip side where you have your back middle, you have the outside front, and the inside fold. So this is folding in and in. And this is on this side printing. And this is, again, where it can be tricky to kind of wrap your brain around it. But that's in positioning for you. This, the way it will print, if you're doing front and back, it's going to match up with this, with the way that you flip pages. Because you may find that, like, when you print Adobe PDF, for instance, you have the option to print on the short or the long fold. And that'll tell you what matches up with what. So this is going to be on the flip side of this side. Make sense?
Makes sense to me. We're out about a minute out from that 2 p.m. mark. So if you have any final tips?
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much that you can do with the software, and it's really hard to kind of get started sometimes because it's like, what are these tools and what do they do? I would just suggest that you always set up your page at the start. If you're trying to make sure things are even, you're moving things around. So for instance, I dragged this up, but I really liked having these all straight. My favorite tool over here, my panel, is Align. It is the best thing ever. I highly recommend that if it's not preset to your panel, that you go to Windows and you add it. Because if you select this and then shift click this, or you click and drag and select that way, you can go right here, align vertical centers, and look, voila, they're all straight again. That's wonderful. But let's say that we're not in a brochure and we wanted to align horizontal centers. You can do it that way too. You can align it to the edge. You can go back to, you can click Control Z, and get it back the way you want. I love this panel. It's my favorite. You can align to selection, to a key object, to your margins, the page, spread. It's useful for any kind of document that you're working in. And if you have multiple lines of text, so for instance, in this one, I have multiple lines. If I wanted to ensure that the spacing was the same between all of them, because the eye can play a lot of tricks on us, you can actually make sure that you're distributing the vertical space there. I want to make sure I'm aligning to the selection though, otherwise it'll move everything from there to the top of the page. And you can do that, voila, but that's a lot of space. So I'm gonna adjust that down and try again. That's pretty nice. So that's my final tip. Any other questions, or you want to know something else?
Nothing in chat.
All right, quiet bunch. But thank you guys for attending our class on creating flyers. I hope that was useful for y'all, and that you go forth and create many, many types of flyers for yourselves. And please, if you haven't subscribed to our newsletter yet, subscribe to it. You will see a lot of our upcoming classes. We have more coming. I saw someone raise their hand. Was there a question, or was that just a...
I think that might have just been a wave goodbye. We've gotten a lot of thank yous in chat.
Okay. Well, that's great. Thanks, guys. Thank you. Couldn't have done it without you. Thanks for attending. All right.
We have one last question. What was the function of slugs?
Oh, yeah. Slug is printer instructions for your printer. So it creates a separate registration. So in your Access Workspace, so this gray area over here, it would create a separate window where you could include instructions. If you create a template in InDesign for someone else to fill out, you can include instructions there. If you have very specific printing instructions, it's where you could include it there for the printer. It's just a designated space, really. It has nothing to do with your design component, nor does it affect anything on the page or the workspace. It's not a printable area. So it might be useful if you're printing a book, for instance, and you want to make sure that you have a set binding space, that they don't adjust it, anything specific like that. Does the library have access to free images? No. We don't have access to Adobe stock. My recommendation would be, again, go to a site like Pixabay or FreePic, or use any images that you yourself have, just so you don't have to worry about licensing. At this time, we don't have any kind of connection to that, so it would be cool if we did. Wish we did, but we don't. Sorry. And let's see if I can't show that again. Yeah, so Pixabay, it's where I got that image. And if you're wanting more line-based, you can go to something like this, which is Vector. If you're going to be working digitally for a lot of things, I would definitely recommend working in SVG if you can, just because it translates to the web browser better than some of the other images. But those things should work. Well, y'all have been great. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for giving this a shot. And please, again, let us know if you have any more questions, or have some ideas for things you'd want to see in the future. Let us know.